Whenever I think about the non-stop parade that is these Disney live-action remakes, the word that usually comes to mind is like safe. They're always a very inoffensive reimagining with some uninspired casting and some mid-CGI. Parents take their kids to see them on 3-day weekends. AMC employees probably have more popcorn to pick up off the floor than usual, and we all go on with our day. But Disney's live-action Snow White remake is getting a bit of a different reception. And I want to talk about why. So the trailer for this movie was posted a couple of days ago, and it is getting absolutely torn to shreds in the comments of every single place it has been posted. And like I said, that's weird considering that like a lot of these movies for the most part are very inoffensive and very safe. So I can point to like 3 distinct controversies that have happened since this movie's inception, since we knew it was coming out, and I'm going to talk about all of them today. But the first one I'm going to talk about is one that I have already discussed here before, and that is Rachel Zegler and her involvement in this film. So I actually made a video about this controversy when it first happened on my channel, and it is to date the most disliked video that I have on here, which is fucking crazy. But if you're completely unfamiliar, a quick recap here. Rachel Zegler is pretty new to Hollywood, relatively speaking. She got her big break in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. She was also in a Hunger Games prequel film pretty recently, and given her track record and her musical talent, it kind of makes sense that she was cast in this Disney live-action remake as Snow White. Before Zegler even said anything about her involvement with the film, a lot of people got mad because Rachel Zegler is Latina and Snow White is a white character, so it's kind of a criticism in the same vein as Halle Bailey getting cast in the Little Mermaid remake. And this criticism is stupid, because like who fucking cares? And I know people get up in arms over it and they're like, oh, well the whole thing about Snow White is that her skin is pale as snow. That's why she's called Snow White. And to that I would say, there are thousands of interpretations of the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs story that exist, including the original 1937 version, and nothing is stopping you from watching one of those versions that happens to align with your freaky Aryan Puritan values. I think the reason why Disney does this quote-unquote diversity casting is because it gives them an easy reason to be like, we're imagining these classic fairy tales for a new, more diverse audience, because it's not good PR for them to come out and say that it's a meaningless cash grab. But they do nothing to shield the actors cast in these movies from the inevitable culture war criticism that they definitely know makes the rounds online every time one of these movies gets announced. In that same vein, Rachel Zegler was relatively outspoken about how this adaptation of Snow White would be different.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
These comments were circulating online for quite some time, and people got really mad about them, which is interesting to me because, again, every single Disney live-action remake has had this, like, surface-level feminist reimagining, especially if it's a story that involves the princesses. And it does get critiqued every time for being very surface-level, but again, Disney has to justify their own reason for these live-action remakes, and so they make these subtle little changes for quote-unquote updated audiences that they can talk about in press junkets or whatever. The difference here is that Rachel Zegler seemingly co-signed this in a way that got her labeled as, like, the angry feminist who wants to ruin the traditional fairy tale of Snow White. And this was also coupled with clips that surfaced of her talking about how she was scared of the original movie as a kid, which people then took to mean that she was, you know, not appreciative of the original source material and therefore wouldn't do a good job with it, and was, like, ungrateful for the role overall.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years when I was doing this film.
So those two clips that I played in this section were actually from 2022, and then they resurfaced in the summer of 2023, and then everybody was attacking Rachel Zegler around that time, and then like I never heard anything about this movie after that for like several months. Then she was in that Hunger Games movie that I mentioned, and from what I understand, I think she actually did a pretty good job in that movie. I didn't see it, but I have seen her performance universally praised pretty much. And then recently everybody got back on the Rachel Zegler hate train, or not everyone, I guess like the culture war soldiers, because she made an inflammatory post about the election, and then Trump supporters were apparently going to boycott Disney, and then she apologized. So this movie was supposed to originally come out in 2024, it got delayed due to the writer's strike to 2025, and in that downtime, the production has changed considerably based on information that we knew, based on controversies that have happened, and one of those controversies involves Peter Dinklage and a lot of misinformation and assumptions that we're going to wade through right now. So if you look at the trailer, all of the dwarfs in this movie are created with CGI, but it's believed that this wasn't always the plan because a while ago there were pictures surfaced from the production of these 7 people following a Snow White stand-in around, and people assumed that these were the original dwarves. I don't think it was ever revealed what happened to these folks, if these folks were cast or credited in a specific way. This image comes from a Daily Mail article, and the whole conceit of that writer was like, oh, look at Snow White's politically correct companions because a few of them are black, I guess. I don't fucking know. Meanwhile, Peter Dinklage, who is probably the most famous little person in Hollywood, went on a podcast and talked about Disney's casting decision in regards to little people and dwarves.
I was a little taken back by they were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White,
yeah.
7 dwarfs.
Sure.
So, take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me.
Well,
You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that fucking backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the fuck are you doing, man?
So seemingly in response to this conversation, Disney put out a statement that says, to avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we are taking a different approach with these 7 characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community. We look forward to sharing more as the film heads into production after a lengthy development period. And then sometime after that, it was revealed that these CGI characters are the stand-ins for the dwarves and they're magical creatures, they're not little people, according to Disney. So some people are arguing that Peter Dinklage got jobs taken away from little people actors, but other folks are arguing that this Peter Dinklage quote was clipped out of context from a broader conversation about how little people are typically only cast in the fantasy genre as dwarves or other mythical creatures, and that they're not cast in other genres of film. And I really don't think that he can be blamed for Disney's decision here, because he was talking about how if they're going to reimagine the story of Snow White and the 7 dwarves from a more progressive angle anyway, he would prefer if the dwarves were not depicted with this older kind of stereotype. And again, this is what happens when Disney is only interested with surface level reimagining when it comes to these live action remakes of really old material. I don't think it's Peter Dinklage's fault that Disney saw his criticism and interpreted that as it's offensive to have little people in this project at all. I think right now, Disney as a brand is afraid of rocking the boat and refuses to engage with any kind of hypothetical nuance in a situation like this, because all they're banking on right now is nostalgia of recognizable property, and not what if there are challenges associated with adapting recognizable property from 1937. Okay, last controversy that we have to get through here. A lot of people don't like Gal Gadot. Okay, so Gal Gadot first came on the scene a couple of years ago when the DCEU was still a thing, and she played Wonder Woman, and the first Wonder Woman film got very favorable reviews. Not because she is particularly great in it. In fact, one of the things that people routinely criticize Gal Gadot for is that she is not a great actress.
And enough champagne to fill the Nile.
Hey, oh, champagne!
And unfortunately, I cannot play any parts of the Snow White trailer for copyright, but of course, when it came out, people were like, oh look, Gal Gadot still cannot act. And of course, Gal Gadot is controversial for other reasons besides her acting skills, because she did serve as a member of the Israeli Defense Forces. And of course, we know that conscription in the IDF is mandatory if you live in that country, and Gal Gadot is Israeli. However, she has spoken out about being pro-Israel over the years, and so a lot of folks are planning to boycott this movie in solidarity with the Palestinian resistance. Additionally, according to this Variety article, Rachel Zegler ended up doing a tweet thread to promote the movie with the hashtag Free Palestine. Speaking of which, if you'd like to support the families in Gaza affected by these ongoing atrocities, you should consider supporting an organization called Operation Olive Branch. I donate to them yearly, they do fantastic work, there are plenty of ways to get involved to get aid to the people who need it, and as always, a link to all of their information is in the description down below. So, Disney has been kind of flailing for a while. They recently got on this hot streak with Deadpool, with Moana 2, and this film has caused a lot of strife. They've done a lot of reshoots. There's rumors that it went over budget. So what does it mean for them that this movie is finally coming out? Nothing good. Probably nothing good for any of us. We know that Disney has been flailing for a while now due to a mix of controversies that were and were not their fault. And so they're playing it safe, they're doing what works for them to please the shareholders, and the success of Moana 2 is pretty solid evidence that they're going to be playing it safe going forward in more ways than one, by relying on recognizable IP and doing their best to avoid any and all political and culture war controversy. However, it is simply too late to save the reputation of this movie. Like I said, it's currently being ripped to shreds in the comments right now. It also just looks really bad. It's suffering from the same problem that like all major blockbuster-ish movies are suffering from right now, which is that they all look like shit. And ultimately, the issue with all of these Disney live-action remakes is that there is no built-in goodwill here most of the time. Nobody asks for these. Nobody wants them to exist. Except for the right-wing online grifters because it's easy money for them. That's who these movies are ultimately for. They're the only people who benefit from their existence because they provide a direct comparison to 90s nostalgia where things were better and characters were white and the evil mega corporation wasn't implementing those rotten identity politics into everything and the characters were white. And don't you miss when movies had really good original music? And don't you miss when movies didn't look like shit with terrible CGI? And don't you miss when the characters were white? None of this is because Disney has become creatively bankrupt and is refusing to pay talented people to push the limits and take risks and create original stories that have the legs to succeed in modern times. It's because the characters don't look how they did back when you were still shitting your pants. That's the reason why you're unhappy with the world. At the end of the day, the Walt Disney Company is going to keep falling into these traps so long as they commit to making content that's easy, sure, but acts as cannon fodder in the ongoing culture war machine. Because if people aren't inspired by the art that you're choosing to put out in the world, they're going to pick up that passion elsewhere, and it's going to be from neckbeards who tell them that the reason they're not feeling that childhood magic anymore when they watch a Disney movie is because those movies are woke. If you want people to start rooting for your movies to succeed again, you have to bring them joy, because otherwise, all they're going to seek out is rage. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. A reminder that you can follow me at all of the links here in this beautiful link tree, which can be found in the description down below, and you can also subscribe to my Patreon for weekly bonus exclusive content. See you next time.